Hello, this is Dr. Manuel Saldivar. I'm a lecturer here at UTRGV. This is the video version of my freshman orientation presentation, The Road to College Success. My purpose in speaking with you today is on the topic of college success, but more specifically, what are the things that students need to think about as they prepare for college? A lot of things go into being successful in college. A lot of decisions have to be made. Many of these decisions, many of the choices that students face are very obvious, something that many students come into college thinking about. What kind of occupation, what kind of job do I want to pursue? What kind of major will I choose? What courses will I choose? These are all really important questions, but the things that I want to focus on in this presentation today are some of the choices students will face, some of the decisions they'll have to make that are less obvious, that are not necessarily something that many students and their families consider, at least not initially when they start in college. Now, the good news is that the university is very much concerned about student success. We offer a lot of opportunities for students to get help with different challenges they may face. If you've already attended or plan to attend a freshman orientation session, you'll hear from a number of offices and departments within what the university calls the Division of Student Academic Success. I'm not going to describe these departments or these offices in great detail, but they include the library, the writing center, the career center, student accessibility services, the advising center, and University College, which is where the UNIV 1301 course, which I teach, is offered. University College also works with undeclared students who have not yet selected a major. My purpose in mentioning these different departments and offices is not to describe them in detail. You can get more information about them at orientation or by visiting their website, and I'll provide the link later in this presentation. It's rather, I bring them up now to make the point that students have a lot of opportunities, a lot of places to get assistance, to get help as they go through their career at UTRGV. But in order for us to help students, they need to be prepared to understand the differences between college and high school and what they need to do on their side in order to be successful. So, given that the title of this presentation is The Road to College Success, so what exactly should students do in order to be successful? The ideas I want to offer here are based on my experiences over 12 years as of 2018, 12 years of experience that I have had teaching college students. The research that I'm familiar with, I am a cognitive psychologist by training, so that means that I study how humans think, and in my own case specifically, how people learn, especially college students. So some of these tips, some of these ideas will come from my experience. Some will come from the research from education and psychology into how college students learn, what college students do to be successful. But I also wanted to note that a lot of these ideas come from my own students. When I was offered the opportunity to speak to families regarding the university, regarding college success, I asked my own students for their ideas on what they thought I should talk about with you. So their ideas are included here as well. Obviously, this topic of college success is a large one, but I tried to boil it down to 3 important points. To be successful, college students need to know who they are, they need to know what they want, and they need to know how to get it. In psychology, we use the term identity to describe the concept of understanding or explaining who we are. Who we are as a person includes our beliefs, our abilities, the image we have of ourselves, our personality, our attitude, and all the many, many other characteristics that are listed, that are shown on this representation. But the point here is that we can't really plan our goals, we can't really have dreams unless we understand exactly who we are, because our goals and dreams are all based on our identity. They all come from the understanding of who we are. A lot of times, students will start college and have an aspiration about achieving a certain profession, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, having a certain career. But many times, in my own experience and also from the research literature on college students, there are times when students may not have a firm idea of how to achieve that dream. And there's no cliche that a goal without a plan is just a dream. So I'll talk a little bit about the process of setting goals and how to make sure that we not only understand where our goal is, but how to get there. What pathway can we follow in order to reach our goal? So on this topic of identity, of who are you, from my experience, from the research into this area, and also from the tips that my own students offered or suggested that I discuss here, the first point I want to make is that students starting college need to be open to new experiences. They're going to encounter many people, not just fellow students, but certainly the professors, the staff that work at the university, other people that they may come across as a student, guest speakers or visitors to campus that might have a very different background from their own background. While certainly I personally, as well as the university, are committed to making sure that students are physically and emotionally safe, and I do believe we do a good job there, I also think that sometimes encountering new ideas, encountering new ways of looking at the world can make us a little bit uncomfortable, and that's a good thing. Only by addressing these sources of discomfort, only by understanding what it is that makes us uncomfortable about things, can we learn and grow as individuals. So being open to new experiences is a big part of that. Students need to be comfortable asking for help. It's part of human nature to try and avoid letting other people know when we're confused or when we have a problem because we're afraid of seeming as if we don't know what we're doing or as if we're not a smart person. That emotional reaction is perfectly natural, but it is also something that students need to learn to manage. There's a lot of evidence that plenty of students in college are very successful and they are comfortable asking for help. They understand when they're having trouble understanding a concept in class. They know when they have a problem with their financial aid or with their academic advising, and they're not afraid to go and ask for assistance so they can solve their problem. So having a comfort with asking for help is very important. And then finally, in terms of identity or who I am, students need to understand their strengths and weaknesses. In the 12 years I've been teaching, I've probably taught several hundred or up to probably perhaps 2,000 students or so, depending on the count. And I can honestly say that a tiny, tiny minority of students, less than a dozen, maybe less than 10, of all those hundreds and hundreds of students that I've taught in 12 years, only a tiny number of them that I truly believe should not be in college because they didn't have the intellectual capacity. They weren't ready yet mentally to be in college. So although being intelligent, being smart is important to be successful in college, that's only the beginning. Students also have to have an awareness of their own strengths and weaknesses. And this is where many students start to struggle. If they don't have a good grip on where they're strong and where they're weak, and weaknesses are not bad, but we have to understand them so we can address them or manage them. This is where students often have difficulty advancing because they don't have a good understanding of themselves, especially in terms of strengths and weaknesses. On this idea of goals, what do you want? Students need to be aware, understand the importance of benchmarking. I have many, and by benchmarking, I mean having a way of looking out at the world and understanding, given the goals that I have, given the things that I want to achieve, what do those things look like in the world, not just in my imagination or in my dreams. For example, there are a lot of students at UTRGV that come here because of our major in criminal justice, which is a great program. My younger brother, as it happens, is a police officer. So that's a great field. I have a lot of respect for it and for people that work in law enforcement or criminal justice. But the problem is some students don't have a really good understanding of how this field works in the real world. For example, I've had a number of students tell me that they're interested in working for a federal law enforcement agency, which means they could work anywhere in the country. But they'll say things like, well, I'd like to work for the Border Patrol because that way I could work in federal law enforcement, be a Border Patrol officer, and still live in the Valley. But of course, working for the Border Patrol, especially if a student is bilingual in Spanish, which is a desirable skill, there's no guarantee that they're going to end up in the Valley. They could end up in Nogales, Arizona, or in San Diego, California, or they could end up on the border with Canada in New York State. Probably not likely if they speak Spanish, but anything's possible because the Border Patrol exists and has officers all across the country. The point again is by benchmarking, by understanding, given my goal, how would that goal play out? What would it look like in the real world? It's an important step into making goals not just realistic, but achievable. Also, students need to understand how to balance the short term with the long term. A long term goal, like wanting to work for the Border Patrol or wanting to go to medical school or wanting to go to law school, is a great goal. But that long term goal is made up of a bunch of small short term goals that are all lined up in a row, so to speak. And so students need to be able to understand sometimes a long term goal is going to require certain things to be done, certain sacrifices to be made, perhaps certain work to be done in the short term. For example, I had a student once who wanted to go to medical school, which was a great goal. I thought this student was certainly very intelligent, could make it. It would be a lot of work, but certainly the person could make it. But the student spoke to me because she wanted to switch out of a biology class she was taking because she thought it was too difficult. It was too hard for her. And although certainly I understand being frustrated in a class that you feel might be really hard for you, or perhaps the professor is not a good fit for your learning style, but I told her, given your long-term goal of wanting to go to medical school, at some point you are going to be challenged. You might expect, I told the student, to have times when it's going to be difficult for you, which is not to say don't do what you want to do, don't drop the class, but consider, are you sacrificing in the short term? Are you going from a tougher class to one that you think is easier? If you do that, are you going to learn as much as you need to know in the future to be able to apply and be accepted to medical school? Again, balancing the long term with the short term. Finally, there's the idea of what I call a pathway, or how to get what you want. So this is sort of putting our goals into practice. Certainly students need to have a plan, a concrete plan, a plan with enough details that they'll understand what they need to do step by step in order to achieve whatever their goal is. And by the way, a good plan also has enough details that you understand how to measure progress. How far along in the plan am I? Have I fallen off track? What do I need to do to get back on the plan? If a student is unable to formulate a plan, sometimes it's because they haven't sat down and done it, but sometimes it's because they may not have a realistic understanding or a correct understanding of what it is they need to do in order to achieve that plan. In my own field of psychology, for example, I see this all the time. A lot of students come in with an understanding of psychology that is very incomplete, because what they think psychology is based on Dr. Phil, the TV show, or on movies, where a psychologist is a mental health therapist, a counselor, and of course there are psychologists that do that kind of work, but they're all psychologists like me. I am not a therapist. I don't treat people with individual disorders. I am a researcher. I work in a university. I teach in a university, and I do research, in my case, statistical research, looking at different kinds of human behavior, specifically learning, specifically among college students. But again, my point is, I understand my own world because I've worked in it. But a lot of psychology majors come in and don't really understand what psychology is about. So they have difficulty developing a plan because their understanding of what it is to be a psychologist is very narrow. So again, having a plan and being able to measure progress as one moves through that plan is really important. It's the beginning to developing this pathway to getting what you want. And then finally, and this is really the key I think I would leave with any student, is building a network. The understanding of whatever challenges a student faces, whatever difficulties they might have, they're certainly not in it alone. I sincerely believe of the many institutions I've been involved with myself in my career, the different universities and colleges where I've taught or worked as a researcher or had other roles, I really believe UTRGV is as committed as any university I've ever seen to helping students be successful. But they need to first ask for help, as I said earlier. They need to know what they need help for, which is part of having goals, having a pathway. And then finally, they need to know where to go for help. Who do I ask? Now, not knowing where to go is okay. That's not a bad thing. But students need to understand, if I have a problem, besides being comfortable asking for help, besides knowing what I'm asking help for, what my goals are, what my pathway is, they need to understand that there are places they can go. They're not in it alone. UTRGV wants to help. The departments I listed previously in this presentation are in the Division of Student Success, among many other departments and offices around campus, and including, of course, all the faculty, all the staff, all the members of the university community. We all want to help. If students will reach out to us, that's the starting point. I promised to provide the website, and here it is, for the Division of Student Success. Again, this includes departments such as the Learning Center, the Academic Advising Center, the Career Center, and other departments that you can learn about by visiting that website. So if a student has a general question and just are not sure where to go, the division of Student Success is a good place to start. Whatever department they might reach out to, if that department or that office is not the correct one to help them, then at least that department will be able to help them understand or direct them where they can go for help. Finally, before I conclude, I want to talk a little bit about the course that I teach, which is called University 1301. So this particular course goes back to the days of UT Bronzeville and Pan American before the merger that created UTRGV. But even beyond that, it was actually at UT Austin when I was there many years ago before I started grad school. In the early 2000s, I had already graduated from college, but I was working as a staff member at UT Austin. And UT Austin was one of the first major universities in the country to start offering a course. They didn't call it UNIV 1301, but it was a similar idea. Basically, the university decided or understood, UT Austin understood that there were students who were capable of success in college, but needed a little bit of extra assistance. Specifically with assistance with understanding what their identities were. Who are they? What are my goals? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? How do I get there? And over time, that course there at UT Austin was very successful. And so many other universities started offering the same kind of course. It's at UTRGV. It's a 3-credit course, so it counts as an elective towards students' degree plan. It focuses on developing what we call in psychology self-regulation, which is just the idea that we as learners, as students, need to manage ourselves. Learning doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of work and effort. It takes time management. It takes an understanding of how to prepare for exams, how to approach readings that are assigned, how to maximize what we learn in a lecture or in a class activity. Some ways of taking notes, for example, are better than others. We need to learn how to set goals, how to understand our own strengths and weaknesses, as I explained earlier, and many other similar topics. So this is what the course addresses. The course is required of approximately 80% of UTRGV students. So those of you family members that are listening to this presentation, most of your students probably will end up taking 1301 at some point or another. The 20% that do not take it, typically it's a function of their test scores or their GPA. The way in which students are determined as to whether or not they must take 1301 is gets fairly complicated, and I'm not going to go into it in this presentation, although you can find out, or your student can find out by speaking to the Academic Advising Center or contacting the Division of Student Success. So, in conclusion, I hope this information has been helpful for you. This is my website, mgsaldivar.com, where if you're seeing this presentation, you probably have visited the website because this is where I'm putting up this YouTube video. But I hope this information has been helpful for you and for your student and gives them a good foundation, especially as they begin their career with UTRGV. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.